So how about Carolina Duke, man?
Oh, how about Carolina Duke? Let me tell you something. I wasn't planning on watching this game this year just because of the fact that both teams are mediocre. But then I had to turn it on because I was at a local establishment having something to eat.
Whoa, you weren't going to watch Carolina Duke?
No, because Carolina's mediocre this year and so is Duke. And I turn it on, and guess what they're doing? They're wearing pajamas. They're wearing, I'm going to sleep over my friend's house, I'm 10 years old, pajamas for the game. Whose imbecilic idea was that? That's an embarrassment. You're Carolina Duke. You're for Carolina Duke, and you're wearing pajamas for a big-time basketball game on ESPN TV. I've seen dudes with scrimmage uniforms that look better than Carolina Duke's uniforms.
Oh, come on. They wanted to spice it up.
And then they go to overtime, and the UFC has to push back their fights because they're coming up next on ESPN for Carolina and Duke, and they can't even figure out the instant replay right.
Basketball is always taking Lord.
And then instant replay took forever in the overtime because people can't communicate. You know, they communicate better in the XFL than they do in college basketball. Meanwhile, I got Krzyzewski talking to his player in pajamas on the sideline. ESPN zooming on the uniform. Like, have a little respect for the rivalry. Don't give them garbage uniforms, man.
What time is it, Jeff?
This is Hangin' with Hendricks and Hennig.
Another edition of Hangin' with Hennig and Hendricks,
bang.
The podcast. Back at you again. Of course, we got the opening shots. We got BS or not. We got real talk, and we got picks. So to get us started, Dashawn, your opening shot is
the Philadelphia 76ers. It's the All-Star break, people. It's the All-Star break. The Philadelphia 76ers are 34-21 heading into the All-Star break. 13 games back of the number one overall seeded Milwaukee Bucks, who just pounded the Sixers in Milwaukee the other week. 22-14 in the conference, 25-2 at home. Everybody wants to talk about how good the Sixers are at Wells Fargo Center. They're 9-19 away from Wells Fargo Center. Now here it is. This is the season, people. For years we talked about the process. For years we talked about, can Brett Brown be the coach? Is Joel Embiid the player that can bring this team a championship? Is Ben Simmons the next LeBron James? Well, I'm here to tell you, despite their big win against the Clippers, where Embiid looked amazing, Ben Simmons looked amazing, I'm going to tell you this. None of it matters until May. Because the Sixers are going to get past the first round. They'll probably play the Pacers or probably the Heat, Celtics. I think they'll get past the first round. But in the second round, can Embiid and Simmons rise to that occasion and push through in the Eastern Conference? There is no more LeBron James. There is no more excuses about this being the Michael Jordan of the Eastern Conference where you just got to wait for that guy to pass. No! Giannis Antetokounmpo has taken that torch and said, listen, this is my conference. Last time I checked, Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, shouldn't they be on that tier? This is when you tell the boys from the men, the playoffs. The second half of the season, would I love to see the Sixers make a run for home court? Of course. Do I think it's going to happen? Meh. But when I look at this basketball team, Brett Brown, everyone says coaching is the most overrated thing in the NBA. In the playoffs, it matters. Just look 2 years ago when Brad Stevens took a team of no superstars and beat the Sixers in the second round. Just look at last year when Kawhi Leonard, being a one-man show on the Toronto Raptors, won the NBA championship. Coaching does matter, people. So, if you're the Sixers, I'm telling you right now, if they lose in the second round, hell, I don't even think if they don't even get to the NBA Finals, Brett Brown's gone. They're going to probably trade Embiid or Simmons. So, it's all got to happen right now.
I think that's the big key, and that is, you mentioned the players earlier as well, the men from the boys, and I've always felt like we've had this conversation, Embiid and Simmons got to step up consistently, not inconsistently, consistently, and to me it's a reflection of their immaturity. Let's be realistic. They're professional basketball players, they're making millions of dollars, but they don't act like adults a lot of the time. They act like guys who are still trying to find themselves, and they're all up in their feelings way too often. Ben Simmons plays well depending on how his personal life is going on. And Joel Embiid, I don't know what his deal is. I don't know if he's moody. I don't know if he's having, personal problems. I don't know what their deal is. But both of these guys, they're letting too many things that shouldn't matter affect them. And I think that is a big problem when it comes to the playoffs. You cannot have girlfriend problems affecting your game on the court. You can't be moody in the playoffs. It's either put up or shut up time. And if Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons show up, this is a championship contending team. But if one of them don't show up for whatever reason, like you said, this team is probably not getting far in the postseason.
What do you make of the whole Joel Embiid Instagram post, all that garbage with the Jimmy Butler? Here's where I take from it. Joel Embiid is upset. He's frustrated. We live in a day and age where athletes use their social media to display how they feel. On Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whenever I'm feeling upset or something, I like to post a status. So imagine what these guys do. Well, but the difference between me and them is that they're getting paid millions of dollars. The camera, the microphone, all of that is on them, the scrutiny. So when they do it, it's kind of like they can't take it back. The whole world has already seen it.
Correct.
So do I believe that Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons can coexist in Philadelphia? I don't think they can. I think it's to the point where the organization is going to have to pick one of the two, unless this team makes a series finals run this year, which I don't think is going to happen. As good as Simmons is and as good as Embiid is, I don't think they're better than Milwaukee.
Look, this team isn't built properly. I don't think either one of these guys are mature enough to handle being a superstar yet. I don't think they have a good enough relationship on or off the court. I don't think that I think Embiid, I think because his lack of maturity, he's easily manipulated by Jimmy Butler through text messages. I think Ben Simmons is too worried about his personal life at times, affecting his on-court game.
I think that's reaching, though. Let's go back, because you said I don't think he's being manipulated by Jimmy Butler. I think he honestly feels that way. Jimmy Butler was a good friend.
Embiid and Butler text every day.
Okay, they're boys. That happens.
All right. After the game Monday night in Golden State, when the Heat beat them, Jimmy Butler is running through the locker room. In fact, I got the cut here. Nick Friedel covers the Warriors, but he also covered Jimmy Butler. So he went in the locker room to check on Butler. This is what Friedel had to say about the night of the Embiid-Butler Instagram.
Late last night in San Francisco, Jimmy is walking over to the shower going, ha, 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 ha. The villain. Yeah. The villain is here. Yeah. So he knew exactly what he was doing. He's got a close relationship with Joel, and I'm sure they'd love to be together again, but there are a lot of different dominoes that would have to fall.
If Jimmy's doing that all the way on the other side of the country, what do you think he's doing when he's texting Joel Embiid in private?
Okay, but you're trying to imply that Jimmy Butler is the mastermind behind Joel Embiid.
Not the mastermind, an influencer. He's an influencer.
Joel Embiid's a grown man. He's 25 years old. I don't think that there's any person that could influence him.
He lacks maturity, so he's easily influenced by things.
But I think that's more to do with what's going on in Philadelphia rather than Jimmy Butler.
I think it's everything. When you're someone who gets easily moved by things, it's a lot of things that affect you. Anything on any level can affect you.
Well, he's boys with Markelle Fultz. Why wouldn't he go to Orlando? I mean, because I think he's smart enough to know that Orlando's not a championship contender with him and Markelle Fultz. I think that more so, Joel Embiid is unhappy with how things are going in Philadelphia. I think he's tired of the coach's message. I think it's gone dry. I think the Ben Simmons thing has become nauseating to the point where
I agree with
someone has to go. Yes. Someone has to go, whether he or Simmons. And I think that it's to the point where it's like, okay, my boy comments on my thing. I'd love to still play with my boy. I think it's the Simmons thing, and this is why I'm going to tell you why. Jimmy Butler chose to leave Philly to go to Miami. He could have came back to Philly and played with his boy Joel Embiid. I think that Ben Simmons, the way he is, his play style, his unwillingness to shoot the basketball is alienating other NBA players. And that's a problem.
I think it alienates some players, but not others.
No, players I think it alienates. If you're a role player and you're a shooter, you want to play with Simmons.
I don't agree, because if he was alienating players as much as you say...
Great players? You don't think he's alienating great players?
Well, okay, then why does LeBron cater to him all the time? I pick him for the All-Star game. I hang out with him. I promote him.
Because LeBron James knows that if it comes that he doesn't need Ben Simmons to shoot the basketball to coexist. And LeBron James is a free agent.
That's the point.
But hold on, listen.
Only
LeBron
certain
James
players
was a
have
free
a problem
agent.
with Ben Simmons' style.
Well, that's what I just said. But LeBron James was a free agent. He didn't come to Philadelphia.
He was never coming to Philadelphia anyway.
It doesn't matter. He knows that he doesn't need Ben Simmons to shoot and be the point guard because that's what he does.
Most players do.
Ben Simmons can be the point power. I mean, elite superstars. Some of them. If Ben Simmons goes to the Lakers right now, he's not option A and he's not option B. He's option C.
He doesn't want to be option A or option B.
He's not going to be. He's not better than LeBron. He's not better than Anthony Davis.
And that's part of the problem. I don't think Ben, we have not you and me, but the world has miscast him. He's not LeBron, okay? Everyone said, he's a point guard. No. He's a point forward in the model of Grant Hill, all right? He's a slasher. He can get assists. He's athletic. He can get triple doubles. But he's not a point guard. He's not a scorer. He's okay with not scoring. And if he was asked to do less, he would be better.
Again, I agree with that.
But on this team, you need him to do more.
But the problem is, yes, and that's a good point. But the problem is that when you're drafted number 1 overall, and you have the opportunity to be the best player in the league. Like let's put it this way: if Ben Simmons had a jump shot, he'd be the best player in the league.
If Ben Simmons wanted to shoot a jump shot, because we know he can shoot. We've seen the videos. We've seen the pre-games. He had a fadeaway jumper against the Clippers on Tuesday night. We know he can shoot. He don't want to shoot. And that's the problem with Simmons. He don't have the want to be
and
great.
That's the problem. And if that's going to be the issue with him, then you're going to have to make a choice. And if I'm the Sixers, I take a long look at this team and say, if I trade Joel Embiid, what's my maximum value? Like if you do a hypothetical, and I don't think they'd ever do it, but what am I getting from Miami?
We'll get into that a little bit later.
Oh, okay, but I'm just saying that for all intents and purposes, when you're trading one of these guys, what is your ceiling as a team with the return you would get? I don't know if it's worth saying that maybe you can advance in the playoffs. I'm thinking if you're going to trade one of these guys, you're basically blowing it up again. You're basically saying, we messed up. We didn't pick the right guys. We have to blow it up again. And I'm not sure if Philadelphia can handle that.
It doesn't help you're on your third GM. It doesn't help that you've changed the person above Brett Brown so many times that
I think Brett's building.
Hear me out for a sec. That the building of the roster for the coach and the players has had no stability and no chance to really develop.
Well,
this is the first time we've had the same starting lineup for a year in forever?
Well, I think that because this was such a highly scrutinized attempt to be competitive with the process, the rebuilding, and then you had all this pressure when Joel Embiid finally could play, Ben Simmons could finally could play, you traded for Markelle Fultz. It was so much pressure on the organization to win now. That's how you get the Jimmy Butler trade when Markelle Fultz is injured and everything's not working the way you want it right away. That's how you get the Tobias Harris trade when Jimmy Butler seems to not be enough and he's still getting acclimated and, et cetera, et cetera. That's how you get the garbage of the Al Horford signing because you lost in the second round on a buzzer beater. Panic moves by the front office shows no clear leadership in the organization. And I think that's the problem.
Let's get to some BS or not.
You're hanging with Hendricks and Hennig.
All right, so you mentioned earlier, before we got to the BS or not segment, I want to present to you, Dashawn, and we can talk about this. So Brian Windhorst on the Hoop Collective podcast specifically said that he has spoken to numerous league executives. So it's a little bit of a long of an explanation, but you got to hear the whole thing. So he kind of sets the groundwork for when he gets to the Sixers. Take a listen.
I got league executives talking to me, as we go through this hours and hours and hours that I spend on the phone in and around the deadline, even after the deadline. Some of the worst for me is like the 3 days of debriefing calls that these guys, I am very appreciative. I do it, but I was on the phone till almost midnight Pacific time after the deadline, talking to people. But anyway, one of the conversations that people are starting to have in the league is, will they move Embiid? What's the price? Where would he go?
Now, Brian Windhorst, that's the groundwork. So he's got multiple people saying to him, they're preparing for the possibility of Embiid being moved and what would it take to get Embiid. Brian Windhorst continues from the Hoop Collective podcast.
I don't think that they would do that without making an adjustment to the head coach. It's such a radical thing. But the fact that we are in mid-February and the people who work in the league, who have to prepare in advance, are mulling over Joel Embiid potentially coming to market, whether that's true or not. I mean, Josh Harris can come on this podcast and deny it if he wants. But the fact that people are talking about it is not good. It's a symptom of where they are.
Dashawn, BS or not?
I think it's not. I think that Joel Embiid has privately expressed, and I don't have any sources, but I mean, Joel Embiid has expressed frustrations. I mean, you can just read the tea leaves of how he feels within the organization, his place within the organization. He was looked at as the savior of the process. He was looked at as a guy that can kind of take this team from rebuilding to a championship level. And if you remember the first year they made the playoffs, who was Rookie of the Year that year? Ben Simmons.
Mm-hmm.
Who got hurt and had to watch his team go on all that long winning streak and didn't come back into the playoffs?
Joel Embiid got injured.
And who was he watching lead the Sixers?
Ben
Simmons. Who was highly scrutinized for not being in shape in the Boston series?
Joel Embiid.
Last year, and Markelle Fultz was Joel Embiid's one of his good friends.
Yep.
Joel has said that. Who was moved because he couldn't play with Simmons?
Fultz.
All these trades, and who was always talked about of guys can fit who?
Simmons.
Ben Simmons. So if you're Joel Embiid, you're looking at this like, hold on. Are you guys building around me or are you building around him? Because this is a guy that refuses to do something in his game that could possibly take us to the next level. While I'm playing injured, I'm busting my butt. I'm doing the best I can. I'm crying after playoff losses. And you guys keep getting rid of my friends, Fultz, Butler. I know Butler was a free agent, but for all intents and purposes, you didn't offer him the max like you did Harris.
You chose Harris over
Butler because he fit who? Simmons.
Also,
so,
who else was he friends with?
Let me finish.
Dario, he was friends with Rocco.
Exactly. And these are the guys that should move, but they got moved for Jimmy. But here's my point. You keep appeasing 25, but you're not doing enough to appease 21. So my thing is that, and by that I mean Simmons and Embiid. My thing is that whose franchise is this? Is it mine or Simmons? Because it's getting to the point where you need to choose. And I think that's how Joel is feeling, and that's where I think it's starting to go around the league, and people are starting to take notice.
Yeah, and I think that part of the thing with the Sixers is if they're being honest, they're going to have a conversation if they do make a trade about one specific thing. How many times have you and I, on every show we have ever done on 97.3 ESPN FM, what is your best ability?
Your availability.
And who's available?
I mean, Simmons.
I think the organization is always going to hold that against Embiid. Whether they want to admit it or not, whether it's something they say verbally or something behind the scenes, I think they know that one guy is available every game and one guy isn't.
So who would you move?
I think that is going to influence what they do.
If you had to move one, who would you move?
Well, I agree with Windhorst about, this is where I say by the way, I say no BS, because the key thing he says, the next head coach. If you are a coach in the NBA today, so whether you're hiring, Dave Fizdale, who we actually hear from in a moment here, whether you hire Jason Kidd, Sam Cassell, who are top coaching candidates in the league, or a former coach like Dave Yeager, whoever you may go after, what is an easier offense to run in this league? Is it a high post, inside-outside offensive game, or a push the pace of the game, spread the floor offense?
I mean, push pace, spread the floor.
Then you're going to keep Simmons and get rid of Embiid. I think it's less about the return than it is about the fact that one guy's offensive skill set is easier to build around. Because I can see Ben Simmons running a, Steve Nash with the Suns-esque offense. I can see Ben Simmons running a, pace offense. Look, I'm not saying this to be hyperbole. I can see him being Magic, running Showtime. He has that skill set. I don't think he's a superstar like Magic Johnson, but I think he has the skill set to do similar things in that kind of offense.
Here's the problem. Why I agree with you, I think you get a bigger return on Simmons, which is why I would probably move Simmons. And there's a big limitation to his game, where if I can get a big haul for Simmons, first of all, I'm thinking of the realm of rebuild, because if you're trading one of these guys, you're basically rebuilding again, because Joel Embiid by himself, I don't think is winning you a championship.
Well, it depends on what you get in return
Simmons,
for either one as well.
But still, I mean, those type of players, those two are two transcended players where I think that unless you're getting a transcended player back, you're not winning a championship.
Which you might. You can take, you can go to somebody and say, who is your disgruntled guy? I'll take him and you take my disgruntled guy.
Well, let's go. Like, if you traded Ben Simmons to Phoenix and got Devin Booker back, Devin Booker's a great player. He's not a transcendent player.
Right.
You see in a lot of guys with Devin Booker's skill set. So my point is that you're operating under the influence that you're not getting a Giannis back. You're not getting Anthony Davis back. You're not getting one of those guys back.
But you
so
might be able to get multiple guys similar on the level of Booker.
Okay, but here's we're operating on this. Let's say I trade Ben Simmons. Give me a team, the Pelicans or something like that. To pair with Zion. And I'm getting back multiple first-round picks.
You're getting Drew Holiday. You're probably getting Brandon Ingram.
I'm getting exactly. So that team's good enough to probably get me in the second round, which is what this ceiling is so far for this team.
Yeah.
But it's not winning me a championship. But those draft picks can finally get me somebody who could be the next Luka Doncic, who could be the next Ja Morant. Somebody like that could give me hope with life after Embiid, or if vice versa, life after Simmons. That's what you're thinking if you're making a trade for one of these two. You're not thinking I'm making a trade and winning a title with the players that are coming back.
One more layer to this. Remember, no matter what trade is done, I was running the numbers yesterday. Do not overlook this. You cannot pull off a legitimate one-for-one deal if you trade either one of these guys. Both of their contracts are max-level deals. You have to get a third team involved. So we're not talking about just trading Joel Embiid to Miami or Ben Simmons to the Lakers or whatever scenario you want to come up with. We're talking about 3, possibly even 4 teams getting involved. Think back to the Iverson trade, right? Think back to all the other deals, like the Shaq deal when he went to Miami. You're talking about 10 players potentially moving in different directions to make the money work. So is there a possibility you trade one of those guys and get multiple guys back? Yes. But like you said, D, I don't think you're going to get a transformational player.
Like, you're not getting Dame Lillard. I mean, there's a chance you can get Dame Lillard from the Blazers if you trade Ben Simmons. But you'd have to give up a lot more. Like, Dame Lillard is a player where I think maybe him and Embiid could take you over the hump.
I agree.
Good Dame is.
Dame is legit. Dame is the truth.
But Simmons brings you a lot on the other end of the floor defensively.
Correct, and you lose that.
Exactly.
But here's the thing: you can trade Embiid and possibly get multiple players, whereas Ben maybe gets you.
I don't think Joel would get you a Dame Lillard because of the
injury. No, but he can get you like Devin Booker, Zach LaVine, those kind of guys, and maybe multiple of them. Remember when Shaq was traded, he was older, but he still got you a haul of players.
But Shaq was a 3-time Finals MVP. He was a transcended big man.
Right, but Joel is younger at this point in time than Shaq was. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's two sides of that coin. Yeah. So, all right, one more BS or not. Dave Fizdale, who I mentioned as a potential coach in the future for the 76ers, he's making the TV tour on ESPN, keeping his name in the news. Because like everybody else, he got fired by the Knicks because the Knicks are a bunch of garbage. Well, Dave Fizdale said this about the 76ers, and their issues are what the cause?
It's not personnel, it's personalities. And I really believe when those two pillars, Ben and Embiid, really decide to say, I'm going to give up a part of myself to make you better. Because that's the only way it's going to work, is when both of them decide that they're going to just give up a little piece of themselves to help the group, to help that next guy. That's when they'll take off. But they got the talent. I don't want to hear about that they don't fit. That's crap, because Joel Embiid can pick and pop and do a lot of different things while Ben Simmons is on the floor making plays. So I just think it's personality.
BS or not, 2 questions, though. 1, do you agree? And number 2, should Dave Fizdale be the next head coach of the 76ers?
First of all, what he said is BS. I think that he's doing his best to say, hey, if Brett goes, I could be the guy that can come in there and make it work, Philly. You ain't got to make no drastic changes unless they want to, but I could be a guy that can come in and, keep the boat afloat. I think that's BS. I would love Dave Fizdale as the head coach of this team, especially with the mindset his first mindset is to come in and fix it before everything just blows up. Here's the problem. First, I think that when you look at Embiid and Simmons, they can work together, and I think that he's kind of saying one thing but meaning another. Like he's saying if a guy gives up a piece of himself, well, he's talking about Simmons too. If Simmons decides to shoot the basketball. Simmons decides to shoot the basketball, of course they can fit together. I think that's obvious. So you got to kind of read in between what he's saying. But I wouldn't mind Dave Fizdale being the head coach of the Sixers.
Yeah, let's not forget, Fizdale, he is out of employment for a specific set of circumstances. One, he coached the Knicks. And until James Dolan sells that team, the Knicks are always going to be a dumpster fire and everyone's going to lose their job. So that's just the life, okay? When he left Memphis, let's not forget that was because one player couldn't get along with him, Marc Gasol. And they chose Gasol over Fizdale. And indirectly, you wouldn't have John Morant on the Grizzlies if Dave Fizdale didn't leave. So on one hand, it wasn't the right move for the Grizzlies, but it paved the way for them to hit the reset button and be where they are now. So, let's remember that. I don't think Fizdale's a bad coach. I love Fizdale as a coach. I love his mentality. I love how he looks at the game of basketball. But I don't think he's going to make this team that much better than they are now, because at the end of the day, the personnel around Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid is not conducive 100% with either one of their games. And those guys are not conducive with each other, so he can audition all he wants. But at the end of the day, as we just discussed, one's going to have to go because they're not 100% compatible. Let's not forget, the reason why Shaq and Kobe were compatible early on was because they both were young. Not because they
Simmons
both were
and Embiid are
100% compatible. Well, hear me out for a sec. At a certain point, after playing a number of years with each other, you learn each other. You learn what you like. You learn what you dislike. It's like being in a relationship. You're together for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. What happens with time passing? You learn more of what you don't like about the other person, right? Well, Shaq and Kobe learned after 3 championships, there's a lot they don't like about each other. And I think Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, for as amicable as they want to be and as, not saying stuff, Embiid said it multiple times, hey, some of us got to make sacrifices. Ben Simmons said multiple times, we are a soft basketball team. This is 2 guys who we never see talking with or to each other about any of this stuff. It's Josh Richardson calling a team meeting. It's Al Horford saying we have locker room issues. It's just not conducive the way it's set up. And that's why I'm saying BS on what Fizdale said about these 2 guys can play together. I agree with him, though, that their egos, their personalities are getting in the way of their success.
I disagree with you when you say the coach. The coach has a lot to do with the personnel. Raul Neto's still on this roster. I think that speaks for itself.
See, I don't think it's 100% Brett Brown. I think that Elton
100%,
Brand. I think Elton Brand is his own man, and he's doing what he thinks is best, whether Brett Brown likes it or not.
I think Brett has an influence.
Influence is different than the shot caller. All right, let's get to them real talk. We're gonna switch it up here away from the basketball to get to something that is very important to both Dashawn and I on Real Talk here.
You're hanging with Hendricks and Hennig.
All right, for this edition of Real Talk, we are going to get a little extra serious here. So, the 30 for 30 that was on ESPN before and after the Super Bowl was the 2-part Michael Vick, which I was actually glad they made in the 2 parts. I thought it would have been too rushed if they would have made it just one whole piece. And I think that there were specific things that both you and I saw in there that we took away from it. I think there's things that I think that people, if you haven't seen the 30 for 30, you need to watch it. Whether you agree with everything they say in the documentary, you need to see it to understand the full picture of the Michael Vick experience that was in football for 2 decades.
Yeah, man. I mean, Michael Vick is and will always be my favorite football player. He's my son's favorite player. My son wears number 7. Michael Vick was somebody that, growing up, as a young kid, growing up in, as we call it, the hood, where you're not as fortunate financially, there's a lot of illegal things going on around you, and you use sports as an outlet. Everybody wanted to live the Michael Vick experience. He was at superstar speed, and he played the most important position in football at quarterback. So growing up, I wanted to be a quarterback because Michael Vick played quarterback. And, looking at him and saying he's an African-American, I'm an African-American. He's fast, I'm fast. He's got a rocket arm. I can throw far, but he wasn't really always accurate. I wasn't always accurate, but he's playing in the NFL. He's making $100 million. He's a guy that everybody says is the best player in the league. So why can't that be me? Unfortunately, he had the downfall with the dogfighting, and we're not going to get too much into all that because, a lot of people have different thoughts and different feelings on what is accepted and, what was blown out of proportion. I think they did a great job in the 30 for 30, kind of putting it both sides. So, one side didn't feel like it wasn't really explained enough. I'm going to be honest. I was a kid when that happened. I didn't think it was going to be a big deal. I thought that, and I'm not saying that animals should be killed or anything like that. I just didn't think it was a big deal. I've got family from that area, and that stuff happens more times than you think it does.
Right, and real quick, if I can just jump in, if you give me a hot second here. I don't want to dive too much into this, but I want to say this specifically because of my background. Because even though I am from South Philly,
yeah.
So I don't have that Virginia background,
yeah.
But I do have another background, which is there are certain things accepted in certain communities that are not in others.
Yeah.
Whether you or I would do said things is not what we're talking about. We're talking about there are certain things that are considered normal. There are certain attitudes, certain perceptions, certain types of music, certain cultural things that are a part of that world. If you are from South Philly, there are things if you are from Newport News, Virginia, that you are never, ever saying or doing, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I think that sometimes when we look at the judgment side of this, we got to remember that sometimes things are done not because it's right or wrong, but because that's all people know.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at it from, here's the real, it's called real talk.
It's real talk. Let's go.
Here's the two things. What Michael Vick did was heinous and wrong. You do not kill animals. That is just unacceptable. But he was a black man who was on top of the world, who had all the money, who had all the power. And let's call it like how it is. People are uncomfortable with that. So when a guy makes a mistake, and he did make a mistake, let's not, I'm not going to sugarcoat it and act like he didn't do something wrong. But they did their best to stick it to him. They wanted to make an example because of who he was and what he was doing in the NFL and the success that he had. Where if Peyton Manning did that, I don't think he's getting the same type of treatment that Michael Vick did. There were people that were calling for the death penalty for Michael Vick. Like, let's separate the crime from humanity. Like, what he did was wrong. He deserved to go to jail. He deserved it. He served the time he did. You're not supposed to do that. Animals are, a lot of people care about animals. I'm sensitive to that fact. But to call for the man to lose his life, like, let's be real, people. There was hidden agendas. So putting all that in the vacuum, watching his comeback, especially in our hometown of Philadelphia with the Eagles. And then I think they did a good job of kind of explaining, even after that miraculous 2010 season, how he was hurt a lot, man. He was taking a lot of hits. I think the Eagles were breaking down organizational-wise as far as their drafts and everything. They didn't draft well.
They did.
The offensive line was always patchwork. And I think Michael had a lot of good football left. It was just he was taking so many hits. And
also, and how many times, and I know you hate when I say this, but the line don't block and the receivers don't catch. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is.
Yeah.
And one of the things you saw in Philadelphia was when he had the weapons and the structure around him, he was throwing 6 touchdowns. What was 6 touchdowns against the Redskins, right?
Yeah.
That's what he was capable of. But at the same time, when the offensive line was getting injured and other guys were around him weren't playing well, he was getting beat up. And I think that it's an element of his story that I'm glad they brought up the whole story.
Yeah.
About the before, middle, and after.
Yeah, and let's put some blame on Vic too. He never really learned how to play against the blitz. I mean,
no.
They would blitz his blind side. He didn't adjust.
And by the way, he admitted that in the documentary.
He admitted,
he's like, look, when I first got to Atlanta, I wasn't serious about football. He's like, I wasn't serious about the playbook. He says, when I got to Philadelphia, Donovan McNabb sat him down and says, look, you're coming in at 5 a.m. You're learning the playbook. You're going to work. We're going to say after we're going to watch film. Like, you got to give Donovan a lot of credit. that he was the man who helped facilitate Vick's second half of his career.
Yeah, and then obviously after that, Vic's talking about how he just couldn't adjust to being a backup and his body was brittled.
And that's fine. At least,
that's fine.
And I'd rather, I like it when an athlete is honest. See, so many times we blame athletes for not being transparent. Can we this time give the athlete credit for being transparent?
And the other thing with Michael is, I mean, you look at the Kyler Murrays. Kyler Murray was a superstar baseball player, but he wanted to play quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he has that vision of Michael Vick. Isn't Michael Vick? Lamar Jackson. Guys like that. You see these guys, and Michael Vick paved the way,
man. You see Vick in their play.
Exactly.
Whether they fully understand it or not. And something you and I have had the conversation about, to me, the mobile quarterback godfather was Randall Cunningham. But to me.
Yeah.
But when Vick came along, he elevated what that position could do. So you started from one place. It was almost like 1.0, 2.0. And I think that football-wise, you got to understand that what Dan Reeves did in Atlanta paved the way with Vick for this whole generation now. There would be, like you said, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Pat Mahomes, Russell Wilson. Those dudes wouldn't be playing this level of quarterback in the NFL if it wasn't for what happened in the early 2000s. The other thing that stood out to me about the documentary, and the thing that emotionally affected me the most in the documentary, was when Vick told the story of how he was out of money. And T.I. calls him and says, "What do you need?" And Vick's like, I don't want your money. He's like, "No, what do you need?" And he gave him more than he needed. And then Vick paid him back. You have to understand that doesn't happen to bad people. If you're a scumbag, if you're a jerk, if you're a loser, dudes aren't calling you up to help you out. All right? Now, you can be a good person as well, and people don't want to help you as well. But the bigger point of this is that is a credit to the character of Michael Vick. You may not have been a fan of his, you may not have appreciated his game, but you have to respect him as a human being. And that touched me because of the fact that was a character presentation, that somebody would call him up and says, "What do you need? I'm going to help you out." He didn't call T.I. T.I. called him. And other people reached out to help Vick because they understand, look, you can make a mistake, but you can rise up from that mistake and be better. And that's what Vick did. Vick became a better man, a better player, and a better everything after that. And to me, that is the bigger picture of the documentary, to say that you can make a mistake, you can go down, but you can rise again and be better.
Yeah, that and the fact that when you look at Michael Vick, he almost became a sympathetic figure after he got out because he paid all the creditors back. He did so much work with PETA.
Still doing it.
It's still doing it to this day. And you would still see people giving him hell and, wishing on his downfall. And it kind of became what I said earlier about you have a hidden agenda because this guy is doing everything he can possibly can to right his wrong. And you're still stuck in your ways. And I think it's a bigger thing about how African Americans are viewed when they have success. Allen Iverson, he didn't commit any crimes, but anytime he was involved in something that he did, people felt like he had. This is real talk. Let's keep it how it is. White America wanted to bring him down. And if Jason Kidd would have been involved in some of these similar things, I don't think it would have been that big of a deal.
But see, and this is where I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, because you and I have had the conversation before. It's not because of his skin color as much as it is because of his background. Because
it's a mixture though.
Vick came from nothing. Vick wasn't a blue blood family wise. He didn't come from the regular nuclear family. He represented an aspect of culture that made people uncomfortable. And it's not, to me, you look at who I want to compare his situation to. John Jones, he's a black man. He comes from a mom and dad, regular household. He has 2 brothers who have Super Bowl rings in the NFL, Chandler and Arthur Jones. John Jones, you could argue, did worse than Michael Vick. He had numerous accusations of infidelity to his wife, who has multiple kids. Michael Vick never cheated on his girl that we know about. All right. John Jones had a hit and run, almost killed a pregnant woman. He got off real easy for that. Never served any serious jail time. Community service. Michael Vick never did that. John Jones multiple times got popped in testing because he was snorting the white stuff. And let's be realistic, we know it wasn't the cheap stuff either you found on the corner. If you have that kind of money and that kind of privilege, guess what? He never went to jail for that. John Jones got suspended for 2 years for testing positive because guess what he was doing? He was using so much blow that he was going to the gas station to buy the cheap Extends. So, that's right, because there are accusations of infidelity. So John Jones is an African-American man who came from a certain background and has certain privileges afforded to him. He never served years in jail, but we forgave him and we considered him the greatest MMA fighter of all time. But because his situation is different and he don't look like Vic, talk like Vic, walk like Vic, dress like Vic, he's treated differently.
I think that's a great point, and I think it's a mixture. While all those were great points, I think it's the McNabb syndrome too. McNabb didn't act black enough. Because it's the same thing on the black side. McNabb didn't act black enough.
It goes both ways.
McNabb didn't walk the walk or talk the talk. McNabb didn't, raise up for the hood and stuff like that. I think when you look at it, it's a mixture. You look in the league today, Lamar Jackson gets in trouble. I think that there's a large if he does something heinous, I think there's a large amount of people that want to see him fail. Because he's a black kid. He didn't play the traditional way. He's doing great things, and they're going to wait for that. But I think there's also a large contingent of people that will come to his aid because he's not the thug kind of guy. He doesn't run with a posse. He's a mama's boy. You know what I mean? Like, but then you look at it
his
again. His
image is different.
Exactly. But you look at it again, and you got Johnny Manziel, a white guy, who he has a posse. Domestic violence was always something that he was associated with. Drinking was something he was associated with. And people still wanted to give him a second and third and fourth chance.
Right.
So, I mean, it's different situations.
That's why, to me, it's more cultural than it is black versus white.
I think
because, for example, one of the things that nobody talks about, okay, every time we hear about the Rooney Rule in the NFL, right? Why no one talk about Hispanic people? You're telling me there's never been a Hispanic? Ron Rivera is Hispanic. No one wants to talk about people of other ethnicities and other cultures because it doesn't fit the narrative. At the end of the day, there's prejudice everywhere, man. And what I loved about the Vic documentary is that despite where he came from, he still rose up. Despite what he did, he redeemed himself and became a better man. And the fact that he recognizes that he was blessed with those second and third chances, he didn't waste it. Because how many times have we seen people who are not good people like Vic is waste their opportunities?
That is true.
You're hanging with Hendricks and Hennig.
All right, before we get out of here, we got picks. NBA All-Star Weekend. This podcast is dropping before the weekend. So if you happen to hear this after the weekend and our picks were right, it's not because we knew ahead of time. It's just because we're smart. And if we're wrong, it's just because, life happens.
Josh's wrong. All right, so we got the skills competition.
All right, so your skills competition participants are Patrick Beverley, Jason Tatum, Spencer Dinwiddie, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Domantas Sabonis, Bam Adebayo, Chris Middleton, and Pascal Siakam.
Wow, that's a real crap show of a skills challenge. None of those names excite me.
Right?
I'm gonna take Dinwiddie because he won it before.
Just to be different, I'm gonna pick Siakam. I think Siakam's
great job, NBA. Like, you couldn't get anybody better than these guys.
Well, Derrick Rose was supposed to be in it, but he was replaced because he had to pull out because of nagging injuries. So if Rose was playing, I think he'd be both of our pick, though.
Yeah.
But I think Dinwiddie's a good pick, but just to be different, I'm going to go Siakam just because I think Siakam's a better all-around people give him credit for. 3-point shootout. Your lineup is Davis Bertans, Devontae Graham, Joe Harris, the defending champion, Buddy Hield, Zach LaVine, Damian Lillard, Duncan Robinson, and Trae Young.
Trae Young. I don't even think about it. Trae Young. He's winning.
Trae Young is not winning. He's too streaky. Give me Buddy Hield. I think Buddy Hield has found his shot in the NBA, and I think he's a more consistent outside shooter with his
found
stroke.
A shot in the NBA on the bench.
He's on the bench that much. Stop.
He comes off the bench.
Now, secretly, off the record, not off the record, we're on the podcast, but I want Damian Lillard to win, personally. But I don't think he's going to, just because I think he's going to run out of a little steam at the end. But your dunk contest, this probably is the most uninteresting lineup I've ever seen. 20 years ago today, when we're recording this podcast, Vince Carter won the dunk contest, which is arguably the greatest dunk contest of the last 25 years. We don't have a Vince Carter in this lineup. Although I bet if Vince Carter was dunking in this lineup, he'd win it. Dwight Howard, Aaron Gordon,
oh my God,
Pat Connaughton,
wow,
and Derek Jones.
Junior from Miami?
Yeah, I'm going Derek Jones.
Yeah, give me Derek Jones.
Yeah, I mean, look, Dwight may come up with one really cool dunk. Aaron Gordon may come up with one really cool dunk. I think I've seen Pat Connaughton dunk twice in my entire life. I've seen a million Derek Jones dunks when he's dunking over people. Imagine you don't have to dunk over somebody, what he can do. The dude can jump out of the gym, so give me Derek Jones.
Yeah.
All-Star Game MVP, remember it is in Chicago, is...
They've changed the game so much. I'll go with JoJo.
I'm going to go with Anthony Davis because he's from Chicago.
All right.
I think he's going to show out for the hometown team because, we've seen guys do that. AI did that in D.C. Kobe did that in Philly. I think you're going to see Anthony Davis do that in Chicago. All right, D, your Twitter account is...
At Dashawn Hendrick.
I am at Josh Hennig, Hennig. You can catch us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you catch your podcast. Hit that subscribe button. You catch us each and every week as we give you our perspectives on the world of sports. Enjoy NBA All-Star Weekend, and we'll catch you right here next week.
This is Hanging with Hendricks and Hennig.